65 million years ago, when the dinosaurs vanished, the Earth split apart.
This rift created the Great Rift Valley, and at its bottom, by the salt Lake Eyasi.
A tribe remained, hunting like their Stone Age ancestors. They are the Hadzabe. About 1,300 people remain. And when a group of them surrounds a 1-ton buffalo, armed only with bows and poisoned arrows.
We are witnessing a survival technique older than the pyramids.
Older than writing, older than any known.
If you are passionate about wild animals and real documentaries, do not leave this video. Watch until the end, subscribe now to the channel, and comment where you are watching from. The Rift Valley is a geological scar that cuts Africa from north to south for over 6,000 kilometers. This fracture in the Earth's crust began to form approximately 25 million years ago and continues widening a few millimeters per year. Millions of years from now, the African continent will split in two. Lake Eyasi, with its 1,050 square kilometers of brackish waters, occupies one of the deepest depressions of this tectonic fault system, surrounded by volcanic escarpments and acacia plains that extend as far as the eye can see. It is in this ancestral setting that the Hadzabe wake up to hunt. The sun has not yet broken the horizon when the Hadzabe men begin to move. The temperature in the hills around Lake Eyasi oscillates between 25 and 35 degrees during the day, but in the early hours of the morning, the air still carries the freshness of the night. This is the moment. African buffaloes spend the hottest hours resting in the shade or partially submerged in pools of muddy water. At dawn, however, they move to graze, and it is in this brief interval of activity that the hunters must act. The Hadzabe camp is temporary by nature. Groups of 20 to 30 people establish small settlements that last a few weeks before being abandoned in search of new water sources, seasonal fruits, and hunting territories. There is no accumulation of goods. A typical Hadzabe man possesses his bow, a handful of arrows, a hatchet, a stone pipe, and perhaps a bag made of dik leather to carry these items. Nothing more. The Hadzabe bow is a work of natural engineering developed over countless generations. Men select specific branches of the gruvia tree, known locally for its exceptional flexibility and resistance. Not just any branch will do. The experienced hunter examines dozens before finding one with the correct initial curvature, without knots that could weaken the structure, with fibers aligned in the right direction. The manufacturing process takes about 2.5 days when done with care. The branch is cut, peeled, and heated over embers so it can be molded into the correct curvature. The wood needs to be flexible, enough to bend without breaking, but rigid enough to store energy when tensioned. Finding this balance demands a sensitivity that only comes with years of practice. The bowstring traditionally comes from zebra or giraffe tendons, elastic and resistant fibers that can be twisted together to form cords of notable durability. Today, some use vegetable fibers extracted from branches of the linear tree, braided by hand until forming a cord resistant enough to withstand the tension of the shot. The force necessary to pull a Hadzabe bow impresses Western researchers. Studies conducted by anthropologists measured an average draw force of 311 newtons, the equivalent to about 70% of the archer's body weight. To put this in perspective, Olympic archery athletes work with forces between 180 and 250 newtons. The Hadzabe pull bows significantly more powerful than elite competitors, and they do this since 3 years of age, when boys begin to imitate the movements of the elders with miniature bows. The arrows demand even more attention. The process begins with the selection of straight shafts of Congoroko wood. Each shaft is heated over fire and straightened using the teeth as a vise, a technique that rips hairs from the artisan's leg, while he rolls the arrow over his shin to check for imperfections. Guinea fowl feathers are used to create the fletching that stabilizes flight. The metal tip is cold forged from large nails or other pieces of scrap metal, hammered against a stone until assuming the desired shape. But the true secret lies in the poison. Without this substance, the hunting of large mammals would be impossible. A common arrow, however well constructed it may be, does not have enough force to kill a buffalo. The penetration would be superficial. The wound would heal, and the animal would continue living while the hunter would return empty-handed. The poison transforms a minor wound into a death sentence. The Hadzabe utilize 3 types of toxins for their arrows, all derived from plants that contain cardiac glycosides. The most common is extracted from the desert rose, a succulent plant with pink flowers called Adenium obesum, which the Hadzabe know as panjuko. This species grows mainly on an island on the southeast bank of Lake Ayasi, and hunters travel long distances to collect its branches and roots. The process of poison extraction is meticulous. Men cut branches of the desert rose and crush them until forming a pulp. The milky sap is squeezed and boiled in water until all the liquid evaporates, leaving behind a black and sticky residue. This concentrate can be molded into small balls and carried for weeks until the hunter needs to utilize it. When the moment arrives to prepare the arrows, the poison is diluted in a mollusk shell and applied as a paste just below the metal tip, never directly upon it. The desert rose poison attacks the cardiovascular system. When it enters an animal's bloodstream, the cardiac glycosides interfere with the functioning of the heart muscle, causing progressively more severe arrhythmias. The first symptoms include excessive salivation, vomiting, and diarrhea. As the poisoning advances, the animal becomes weak, lethargic, and unstable on its legs. Death can take hours, sometimes a whole day, depending on the size of the prey and the quantity of poison that entered the organism. An African buffalo is not a common prey. It is one of the most feared animals of the continent, respected even by lions and feared by professional hunters armed with modern rifles. The Syncerus kaffa, known as the Cape. Buffalo is the largest subspecies of African buffalo and one of the most dangerous animals of the continent. Adult males weigh between 425 and 900 kilograms, the equivalent to a compact automobile. They measure up to 1 meter and 70 in height at the shoulder and can reach 3 meters and 40 in length from snout to tail. Their horns form a continuous bony structure over the skull called a boss, which functions as a natural shield against predators and rivals. The reputation of the African buffalo is sinister. Trophy hunters nicknamed it Black Death and Widowmaker. It is estimated that the animal kills about 200 people per year in Africa, although this number is disputed and may include deaths caused by hippos and crocodiles erroneously attributed to buffaloes. What is not disputed is the animal's temperament. Wounded buffaloes are known to ambush their pursuers, circling their own track to attack by surprise. When a member of the herd is threatened, the entire group can charge as a unit, making it impossible to isolate vulnerable individuals. Lions, the largest land predators of Africa, rarely attack adult buffaloes alone. Hunting groups composed of 3 or more lionesses are necessary to bring down a healthy specimen, and even then the confrontation frequently results in severe injuries for the felines. Nile crocodiles manage to capture old and solitary buffaloes that approach the water too closely but avoid herds. Leopards, hyenas, and African wild dogs represent a threat only to newborn calves. And yet the Hadzabe hunt this animal with wooden bows and handmade arrows. The strategy begins long before the shot. Hadzabe hunters do not go out in search of just any buffalo. They look for specific signs, tracks of animals that strayed from the main herd, footprints that indicate lameness or advanced age, marks that an individual is alone. Old males, known by the Zulu as Daga boys, for passing a large part of the time in mud pools to avoid sunburns, are preferred targets. These animals have abandoned the protection of the group and tend to be slower, although they are also notoriously more aggressive and unpredictable. Tracking can last hours or days. The Hadzabe walk on average 15,000 steps daily during their subsistence activities, and a large game hunt extends this number significantly. They read the savannah like other people's read books. The depth, of a footprint reveals the weight of the animal. The distance between marks indicates speed of displacement. Fresh versus dried dung establishes how much time has passed since the prey was at that location. Broken branches, horn marks on trunks, grazing patterns in the grasses. Everything communicates information to those who know how to interpret. The moment of the shot is calculated with millimetric precision. The ideal distance varies between 15 and 30 meters. Closer than that, the risk of a fatal charge increases exponentially. A buffalo can reach 56 kilometers per hour in a charge, covering 30 meters in little more than 2 seconds. The hunter needs time to seek cover or climb a tree in case the animal decides to attack instead of flee. The Hadzabe arrow travels at approximately 45 meters per second, carrying an average kinetic energy of 37 joules. This force is not sufficient to bring down a buffalo instantly. That is not the intention. The objective is to ensure that the poisoned tip penetrates deeply into the muscle tissue, allowing the toxin to enter the bloodstream and begin its slow but inexorable work. After the shot, the hunters retreat. There is no immediate pursuit. Running after a wounded buffalo is suicide. Instead, the Hadzabe wait. They observe from afar. They follow the tracks of the poisoned animal over hours, maintaining a safe distance while the poison takes effect. This patience is as essential as the precision of the shot. An anxious hunter who approaches too soon may find a buffalo still perfectly capable of killing him. There is a ritual rule that the Hadzabe follow rigorously during this waiting period. The name of the wounded animal cannot be pronounced aloud. They believe that speaking the name would allow the spirit of the prey to recover its strength and escape. This superstitious silence reveals something deep about the relationship between the hunter and his prey. There is no triumphalism. There is no premature celebration, only absolute concentration and respect for the power of the animal they are trying to bring down. The poison works in silence inside the buffalo's body. No scream, no immediate external sign. Only the deadly chemistry spreading through the bloodstream, finding its way to the heart muscle, where it will begin its methodical destruction. Hadzabe hunters know this process intimately, although they have never studied biochemistry or animal physiology. They learned, by observing generation after generation, how different prey react to the poison, how much time it takes for each species to succumb, which behaviors indicate that the end is near. The first hours after the shot are critical and unpredictable. Some animals travel kilometers before presenting visible symptoms. Others begin to stagger in a matter of minutes. The variation depends on multiple factors: the location of the wound, the quantity of poison that penetrated the tissues, whether the arrow hit an area rich in blood vessels, the general state of health of the animal. Hadzabe hunters recognize the stages of poisoning by observing the prey's behavior. First, the buffalo continues moving normally, perhaps with slightly reduced speed. Then, it begins to stop more frequently, the head hanging lower than usual. Excessive salivation creates lines of foam around the mouth. The animal seeks shade or water with increasing urgency. Its legs begin to fail, first subtly, then evidently. It lies down, gets up, lies down again. The cycle repeats until the legs no longer respond. Tracking during this phase demands all senses. The Hadzabe have no binoculars, GPS, or any modern technology. They depend exclusively on knowledge transmitted for generations. Grandfather taught the father, who taught the son, who will teach the grandson. Each detail of the African savanna has been mentally catalogued over millennia. This specific tree is a good observation point. That rock formation offers protection against charges. This type of tall grass hides tracks, but can also hide predators. The education of a Hadzabe hunter begins in childhood and never truly ends. The region around Lake Eyasi presents particular challenges. The lake occupies the bottom of a depression in the Rift Valley, surrounded by escarpments that rise 700 meters above the brackish waters. The vegetation is a mixture of acacia savanna, sparse woodlands, and palm trees that border the lake shores during the rainy season. Gigantic baobabs dot the landscape, some of these trees with trunks of 8 meters in diameter and ages estimated at over 1,000 years. The terrain alternates between open plains, where visibility extends for kilometers, and wooded valleys, where a buffalo can disappear in seconds. The temperature at the bottom of the valley frequently exceeds 35 degrees at noon. Annual precipitation does not pass 300 millimeters in some areas, concentrated in 2 short rainy seasons. This aridity means that water sources are rare and predictable. The Hadzabe know every spring, every permanent pool, every point where groundwater surfaces. A poisoned buffalo feeling ill will almost certainly seek water. This predictable behavior works in the hunter's favor. The most dangerous moment of the hunt arrives when the buffalo finally falls. A 900-kilogram animal does not die silently. There are spasms, attempts to get up, uncoordinated movements of limbs and head. The horns remain lethal even when the rest of the body fails. A blow delivered by reflex can pierce a human abdomen or crush a skull. The hunters approach with extreme caution, observing the animal's eyes. While there is focus in that gaze, there is danger. The confirmation of death comes when the muscles relax completely and the eyes lose their shine. Only then do the Hadzabe approach to examine their prey. The size of the animal frequently surprises even experienced hunters. A buffalo lying on the ground seems smaller than when it was standing, but as the process of dismemberment begins, the real scale reveals itself. The quantity of meat in a single animal can feed an entire camp for weeks. The processing of the buffalo is a collective work that can last the entire day. Women and children join the hunters at the carcass site, each person with a specific function. The Hadzabe use knives with bone handles and blades made of repurposed metal, sharpened on stones until they cut with surgical precision. Nothing is wasted. Each part of the animal has a utility. The skin is removed in large sections that will be subsequently tanned and transformed into bags, sheaths for knives, and other utensils. The tendons are separated carefully to serve as material for bowstrings. The larger bones are broken to extract the marrow, considered a nutritious delicacy. The stomach and intestines are cleaned and utilized as containers to transport water and fat. A curious tradition involves the use of baboon bone marrow as a moisturizer for the skin. The Hadzabe apply this fatty substance on the body for protection against the sun and the elements. The sight of hunters covered with the yellowish fat of monkey bones may shock Western visitors, but it represents a perfectly logical adaptation to an environment where industrialized products simply do not exist. The buffalo meat will be shared according to rules unwritten but universally understood within the community. There is no individual ownership over the hunt. The man who fired the fatal arrow has no greater right over the animal than any other member of the camp. This radical equality is one of the fundamental principles of Hadzabe society. Who has more than he needs, distributes. This philosophy has kept the group's cohesion for longer than any economic system invented by civilization. The poison utilized in the arrows does not contaminate the meat. The cardiac glycosides that kill the buffalo are destroyed by the heat of cooking, or when the meat is consumed raw, by the digestive process. The toxin needs to enter directly into the bloodstream to be lethal. Ingested by the stomach, it is neutralized by digestive acids before causing significant damage. The Hadzabe discovered this property through millennia of experimentation, certainly paying with lives for the knowledge of which plants were safe and which were fatal. Buffalo hunting has become rarer in recent decades. Hadzabe territory has shrunk dramatically in the last 50 years, with 90% of their ancestral lands lost to farmers, herders, and conservation areas that ironically exclude them. Large animals like buffaloes, zebras, and giraffes, which once abounded in the region, are now found mainly inside national parks, where traditional hunting is prohibited. Today, the Hadzabe hunt mainly dik-diks, small antelopes that weigh only 5 kilograms, baboons, warthogs, and impalas, with occasional elands and kudus when luck permits. In October of 2011, a Hadzabe community of 700 people received property titles over more than 20,000 hectares of land. It was the first time that the government of Tanzania formally recognized the territorial rights of a minority tribe. But 20,000 hectares seem like a lot, until we consider that hunter-gatherer groups need vast territories to sustain their way of life. Anthropologist Frank Marlowe, who studied the Hadzabe extensively, documented that their original lands covered an area several times larger than what was granted to them legally. Pressure on the Hadzabe comes from multiple directions simultaneously. Maasai herders bring cattle that compete for water and scare away wildlife with their noise and smell. Iraq W farmers expand onion plantations that now dominate the Bare region, transforming savannas into cultivated fields. The Tanzanian government establishes conservation areas that paradoxically prohibit the original inhabitants from hunting on their own ancestral lands. Tourists arrive in groups to observe the last hunter-gatherers of Africa, paying to participate in demonstration hunts that transform survival practices into a spectacle for cell phone cameras. Some Hadzabe have abandoned the traditional way of life completely, moving to villages and accepting wage-paying jobs. Others try to balance the sale of handicrafts to visitors with the maintenance of their ancestral practices, a delicate negotiation between authenticity and economic survival. The Hadzabe language, called Hadzan, is a linguistic isolate with no known kinship with any other language on the planet. Linguists and geneticists have studied this question for decades and always arrived at the same conclusion. The Hadzabe speak a unique language without identifiable cousins or ancestors. The language contains click and pop sounds that superficially resemble the Khoisan languages of southern Africa, but genetic and linguistic analyses confirm that there is no relation. This linguistic independence suggests an isolation of thousands of years, a separation so ancient that any connections with other human groups were lost in the mists of deep time. The Hadzabe represent one of the oldest human lineages still existing, genetically distinct from the majority of African populations. When their language disappears, and it is classified by UNESCO as vulnerable, a unique way of describing and understanding the world will disappear with it. The Hadzabe boys of today still learn to make bows. They still practice shooting with improvised targets hung on acacia branches. They still accompany the elders on hunting expeditions at dawn, carrying small bows proportional to their size, observing every movement of the adults with attentive eyes. But the context has changed fundamentally. Many families now send children to government schools, where they learn Swahili and English instead of the tracking techniques their great-grandparents mastered. In classrooms, they study mathematics from textbooks instead of mentally calculating the trajectory of arrows. They memorize dates of European history instead of learning which plants cure fevers and which kill silently. Some young people return to traditional life after experiencing the outside world, discovering that urban life does not offer them the satisfaction they expected. Others do not return, absorbed by expanding cities that promise opportunities but frequently deliver only alienation. The question that hangs over the Hadzabe is the same that haunts indigenous peoples all over the planet. Is it possible to preserve ancestral knowledge in a world that considers it obsolete? Is it possible to maintain a cultural identity when the physical and social environment that sustained it disappears progressively? Is it possible to be a hunter-gatherer in the 21st century? There are no easy answers. What exists is a handful of men and women who wake up before the sun in the hills around Lake Ayasi and do what their ancestors did for 10,000 years. They manufacture bows of gruya wood. They prepare desert rose poison. They track animals through the dusty savanna. And occasionally, when all conditions align, they bring down a 900-kilogram buffalo with technology that existed before the pyramids. The fallen buffalo is not just meat for the community. It is the confirmation that something essential still pulses in that forgotten corner of Tanzania. While the world develops artificial intelligences and colonizes space, the Hadzabe remind us of an uncomfortable truth. Humanity survived 200,000 years without any of these things. It survived with observation, patience, knowledge transmitted from father to son, and the courage to face animals much larger and stronger. Each successful hunt is a living archive. The 3-year-old boys who imitate the movements of the elders are receiving an education that no university can offer. They learn to read the wind, to decipher tracks, to prepare, poisons without poisoning themselves, to calculate the trajectory of an arrow against a moving target. When this knowledge disappears, and it is disappearing, with 90% of ancestral lands already lost, humanity will lose something that it can never recreate in a laboratory. The Hadzabe do not hunt buffaloes to prove courage or seek trophies. They hunt because that is how their grandfathers fed their fathers, and their fathers fed them. The arrow that crosses the air carries more than desert rose poison. It carries 10,000 years of trial and error, of generations that died so that the following ones would learn what works. Each hunt is a silent testament that before we were consumers, programmers, or astronauts, we were this, creatures intelligent enough to bring down giants with branches and flowers.